For nearly half a century, the German Naval Archive held a simple answer. U-869 had been sunk off the coast of Gibraltar in February 1945. The file was closed. The 73 men aboard were listed as dead, their deaths assigned to a specific engagement, a specific location, a specific enemy. Their families were told where their husbands and sons and brothers had perished. There was a record. There was a cause. There was, it seemed, an ending. There was only one problem. The submarine was not at Gibraltar. In September 1991, a pair of recreational divers exploring an anonymous underwater ridge, approximately 60 miles off the coast of New Jersey, pulled themselves through black water toward a shape that had no business being there, a steel hull. Massive, silent, resting in roughly 230 feet of water, so far from where any official record placed it that the discovery didn't just raise questions, it tore apart everything that had been officially declared true. The conning tower was still intact. The hull had been catastrophically breached, but not by time. Whatever had destroyed U-869 had done so with sudden and violent force. 73 men had gone down with her into the dark. And the ocean had kept the secret for 46 years while the German naval records told a different story entirely. How does a submarine end up on the wrong side of the Atlantic? How do the official records of one of history's most meticulously documented navies place a vessel in a location thousands of miles from where it actually died? Was it a clerical error? A wartime failure of communication? Or was something else buried inside that hull? Something that made certain people, in the chaos of a collapsing Third Reich, quietly prefer that U-869 stay lost. The ocean doesn't lie. The paper trail does. To understand why the discovery of U-869 sent shockwaves through both the diving community and the historical record, you first have to understand what the German U-boat arm had become by the winter of 1944 into 1945. The Kriegsmarine submarine fleet, the weapon that had once brought the entire Allied Atlantic supply chain to the edge of collapse, was, by that final winter of the war, a force that was sending men to their deaths in exchange for almost nothing. The golden era of the wolf packs, those terrifying coordinated attacks of 1940 and 1941 that had torn open Allied convoys with brutal efficiency, was long over. The introduction of centimetric radar, long-range air patrol aircraft, improved Allied sonar, and the cracking of the Enigma cipher codes at Bletchley Park had transformed the Atlantic from a German hunting ground into a killing field for U-boat crews. By 1944, the statistical reality facing any man who climbed down into a submarine and sealed the hatch above him was almost incomprehensible. The survival rate for operational U-boat crew members had collapsed to levels that amounted to a near-certain death sentence. Of the roughly 40,000 men who served in U-boats throughout the war, approximately 30,000 would never come home. And yet, Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz continued to send his boats out. The rationale, strategic, political, psychological, was layered and complex. Every Allied escort vessel, every destroyer, every long-range patrol aircraft, dedicated to hunting submarines in the Atlantic, was a resource that could not be used elsewhere. Even a largely ineffective U-boat campaign drained Allied attention and resources. There was also the matter of morale, of the symbolism of continuing to fight, of the cold logic of a regime that had already decided the deaths of its own soldiers were an acceptable cost for projecting an image of unbroken resistance. By late 1944, U-boats were being sent on patrols from which Kriegsmarine intelligence almost certainly knew they would not return. U-869 was a Type IXC-40 submarine, a long-range ocean-going boat designed specifically for extended patrols far from European waters. This was not one of the smaller coastal or medium-range boats. The Type IXC-40 was built for endurance. At approximately 76 meters in length and displacing over 1,000 tons when submerged, she was a significant vessel, far larger than the Type 7 boats that had formed the backbone of the Wolfpack campaigns. She was fitted with 6 torpedo tubes, 4 at the bow and 2 at the stern, and could carry up to 22 torpedoes. Her diesel-electric propulsion system gave her a range of over 13,000 nautical miles on the surface. And she was capable of submerging to operational depths that put her beyond the reach of many Allied depth charge attacks, though not beyond the newer, more powerful charges the Allies were deploying by 1944. She had been designed to go far, stay long, and operate independently in ocean waters, where air cover was minimal and convoy traffic remained lucrative. On paper, she was a formidable instrument of war. In reality, by the time she was commissioned, the world she had been built to dominate no longer existed. U-869 was commissioned on the 26th of January, 1944, and placed under the command of Oberleutnant Zur C. Helmut, Neuerberg. Neuerberg was 24 years old. That detail is worth sitting with for a moment. The man responsible for 72 other lives. For the operation of a highly complex warship, for navigating one of the most dangerous stretches of ocean in the world, and then conducting offensive operations in enemy-controlled waters, was 24 years of age. He was not unusual in this regard. The accelerating attrition of experienced U-boat commanders by 1943 and 1944 had forced the Kriegsmarine to push younger and younger officers into command positions. Neuerberg had the training. He had the rank. He had almost certainly been told in the formal and precise language of the Kriegsmarine what his mission objectives were and what the strategic situation required of him. What no briefing could fully prepare him for was what it actually meant to take a steel tube into the deep Atlantic in the winter of 1944, knowing what had happened to so many boats before his. The crew of U-869 numbered 73 men in total, packed into a vessel that offered almost no private space, no comfort, and no escape from the constant awareness of how thin the barrier was between their lives and the crushing pressure of the ocean outside the hull. Submarine warfare in the Second World War was an act of enforced intimacy and enforced endurance. Men slept in shifts, often in the same bunks, their rest measured in hours rather than nights. The air recycling systems of a Type IXC-40 were functional, but they could not fully mask the accumulated odor of diesel fuel, unwashed bodies, damp steel, and cooked food that saturated every surface and every breath in the enclosed environment. Fresh water was rationed with severe strictness. Bathing was a luxury that simply did not exist on a war patrol. The psychological effect of weeks at sea in these conditions, with the constant threat of detection, of a depth charge pattern walking toward your position, of a contact on the hydrophones that might be a merchant vessel or might be a destroyer hunting you, was not something that could be trained away. It lived in a man. It accumulated. It changed him. U-869 departed Kiel on the 8th of October, 1944. For sea trials and working up exercises in the Baltic. The Baltic had served throughout the war as the Kriegsmarine's training ground its enclosed waters. Largely protected from Allied submarine and air attack, allowed new crews to drill their procedures, test their equipment, and build the kind of coordinated responses that might keep them alive in the open ocean. The working up process for a new U-boat crew typically lasted several months and involved extensive exercises in torpedo attack procedures, emergency diving protocols, damage control, and 1,000 other disciplines that submarine warfare demanded. By the time U-869 was declared operationally ready, her crew had spent weeks learning to function as a single mechanism inside that steel hull, learning each other's roles, each other's rhythms, building the kind of wordless operational understanding that was the difference between a competent submarine and a dangerous one. Her operational orders, issued in late 1944, assigned U-869 to a patrol area designated as Grid Square CA, which covered waters in the central North Atlantic off the American eastern seaboard. This was a significant operational assignment. By late 1944, waters close to the American coast had become an extraordinarily dangerous proposition for any U-boat commander. The United States Navy had developed a formidable anti-submarine warfare infrastructure along its eastern seaboard following the catastrophic early war period of 1942, when German U-boats had conducted Operation Drumbeat. Paukenschlag, sinking hundreds of Allied vessels within sight of American coastal cities in a campaign of almost unchallenged devastation. That period of vulnerability was long past. The American coastal convoy system, combined with air patrols, improved sonar technology, and coordinated hunter-killer groups of escort vessels, had transformed those waters into some of the most heavily defended anti-submarine environments in the entire Atlantic theater. Sending U-869, there was not a tactical decision made with genuine optimism. It was the deployment of a dwindling asset into a high-value but increasingly unwinnable operational zone. And then the communications became confused. This is where history begins to fracture, where the official record starts to show the cracks that would not be fully visible for half a century. At some point during U-869's operational period, the boat received a message redirecting her to a patrol area off Gibraltar, a different ocean, a different set of strategic priorities, a fundamentally different deployment than the one she had originally been assigned. This message, according to post-war analysis of Kriegsmarine radio logs, was transmitted to U-869, but there is compelling evidence to suggest it was never properly received or never properly acknowledged. Whether the fault lay in atmospheric conditions affecting the long-wave radio transmissions that were the U-boat arm's primary means of communication with its boats at sea, or whether there was a failure somewhere in the chain of signal confirmation that BDU Befehlshaber der Unterseeboot, the U-boat command used to track its boat's receipt of orders, the result was the same. U-869 appears to have continued on her original course toward American waters, and BDU, operating on the assumption that the redirect had been received and obeyed, recorded the boat as operating near Gibraltar. This divergence between where the Germans believed U-869 to be and where she actually was would become the foundation of one of the most remarkable misattributions in naval history. When contact with U-869 was lost, as it inevitably was, Kriegsmarine records placed her loss in the Gibraltar area, attributing her destruction to two specific Allied anti-submarine actions in that region. The case was apparently closed. Two Allied warships had attacked a submarine near Gibraltar. U-869 was in the Gibraltar area. The mathematics of wartime attrition produced a conclusion that was administratively tidy, historically recorded, and, as the wreck in 230 feet of water off New Jersey would eventually prove, entirely wrong. There is something profoundly unsettling about this error when you consider what it meant for the families of the 73 men aboard. They had been given information the location of their loved ones' deaths, the identity of the vessels responsible, the approximate date of the engagement. That information was specific enough to feel true. It had the texture of official knowledge, of verified military record, of history confirmed and closed. Decades passed, generations absorbed the account. The men of U-869 rested, officially, in the waters off Gibraltar, while their actual remains lay in the entirely different darkness off the New Jersey coast, in a submarine that the historical record insisted was somewhere else entirely. What makes the story of U-869 more than a tale of bureaucratic error is the question that the wreck's discovery made impossible to avoid. The communications failure, if that is what it was, sits at the heart of everything. A submarine diverts from its ordered position, continues toward American waters. It is destroyed there, while the organization that sent it records the loss in a completely different location. In the chaos of a war that Germany was visibly, catastrophically losing, in an organization suffering staggering attrition, in a communications environment where atmospheric interference and Allied signals, intelligence operations were constant variables, the failure is entirely possible as a simple tragedy of wartime confusion. It may be nothing more than that. A message that didn't get through. A confirmation that was assumed rather than verified. 73 men sailing toward death in the wrong direction, while their command wrote them into the record in the wrong ocean. But the wreck sits in 230 feet of cold water off New Jersey, intact enough that divers could read the hull number. The history books said it was somewhere else. And somewhere in the distance between those two facts, between the steel reality of the ocean floor and the paper reality of the archive, 73 men have been waiting for someone to finally ask the right question. The ocean was patient. The truth, it turned out, was too.